In today's lesson, we'll learn about new part of the IELTS exam and we'll learn about listening module. I will give you a brief overview to the IELTS listening module and things you need to know, but we'll specifically focus on sections 1 and 2 and how to complete these two sections successfully. And now we are going to review our IELTS listening module. Before we start learning different strategies and tips, I would like to give you a brief overview to the listening section. In the IELTS exam, you'll have 4 sections and 40 total questions. You'll be given 30 minutes to listen to the recordings and take notes and answer the questions. And last 10 minutes, you'll be given to transfer your answers to your answer sheet. In the IELTS test, you'll see 4 different sections, and in section 1 is going to be a conversation within a social situation. Your section 2 is going to be about a monologue on a general subject. Section 3 is going to be about a conversation between up to 4 people with an educational or training context. And the last section of the test is a section 4, which is a monologue, lecture, or academic talk. Most of the time, section 3 and 4 are the most difficult ones for the students. So you have to really try to do your best when you are completing sections 1 and 2. Also, you'll see different types of tasks in your IELTS listening test, such as note completion, gap fill, short answer, table completion, multiple choice. Most of the time it has 3 different options, A, B, C, but sometimes you might see A, B, C, D as well. Also, you might have tasks such as sentence completion and labeling a diagram. Again, in listening test, you will have 4 sections, 40 total questions, and 40 minutes to complete this entire task. And here I'm going to explain what type of task you are going to have in each section and what kind of strategies we are going to learn. For example, during our course, we are going to learn general strategies for listening for words and listening for numbers. And we'll also learn specific strategies for each section. For example, in section 1, which is about conversation, we are going to learn how to complete a form, complete a table, choose answers from a list. In the section 2, which is going to be about a talk, we are going to learn how to complete sentences, label a diagram, plan or map, and also give a short answer. In our section 3, it's going to be about discussion. We are going to review how to choose answers from multiple choices, label a diagram, and match words and phrases. And our final section 4 is going to be about a talk or lecture. And here I'm going to explain how to classify words or statements, complete notes, and complete a flowchart. And now we are going to review our first strategy of the listening test, which is a general strategy, and it's going to be about listening for words. Remember, when you are listening to different recordings in the IELTS test, you have to use the questions you have on your handout to focus your attention on the keywords as you listen. Remember, the most important part here is also to circle the keywords. And the most important tip is for you to remember that keywords are often stressed and you need to listen for words that are stressed. And as you know, stressed words always sound a little bit louder than the rest of the words. So here we have an example about a similar task. So here we have a following question. Choose 2 things that are included in the price of the hotel room. So in this case, the word 2 is emphasized. So you have 5 different options, A, B, C, D, and E. So from A, B, C, D, and E, 5 options, you have to pick only 2 things. So please pay attention when you are listening and circle the keywords, such as this one. So your keyword in this question would be 2 and included in the hotel room. So make sure you're listening carefully and always circling the keywords. It will help you to stay focused. Our next general strategy is listening for numbers. Our strategy for this task is to be familiar with different ways to express numbers. Remember that taking notes is very important, and whenever you hear a number, make sure to do that. Also keep in mind that when we have a long number, the intonation rises and then falls at the last number. Whether the number is an identification number, a date, or a price, there are different ways the number can be set. Look at our following example about dates. As you can see, November 24th, 2013 can be set in two different ways, as November 24th, 2013, or it can be set as November 24, 2013. And now we're going to review how to say price, time, decimals, telephone numbers, credit card numbers, and ID numbers in different ways. So as you see on the slide, we have price 1333, and it can be said differently. So you have to be aware of that, and you have to be able to recognize that number. So as you see, it can be said as the following: $13.33, or the speaker can say 1333. Next one we have time, which is 2:45. So the first example we have it at 2:45. It can be also said as 2:45 or 2:45. So next one we have, it's a decimals. So for example, when we have decimals, we can say it a little bit differently. So you have to make sure you know how to recognize this number. So for example, here we have 3.75. Also, we can say it as a 3 3/4, or we can also say it as 3 3/4. And the last one we have, it's about telephone numbers, credit card numbers, and ID numbers. So here, for example, you have a number, and this number can be set as the following: +150575 3948, or we can say it as +1505 475 3948. So you have to make sure before you take your IELTS test, you are aware of the numbers and how they can be set. IELTS Listening Module, Strategies and Tips, Part 2. And now we are going to learn our specific strategies for the Section 1. As you remember, our Section 1 is going to be about conversations. And the first task we are going to review is completing a form. The most important thing to remember when you're completing a form is paying attention to the words before and after the gap. Make sure to listen for the name and address which appear before the gap. So for example, here we have an example below with a name and address. As you see, we have a name, Juan, Gap, and John's. So in this case, as you can tell, we have to listen for the first name of John's. So for example, when you hear first name, and then it will be followed by John's, you know that's information you need to write down. The next example we have address 154, 2, and gap. So whenever you hear 154, the following information you're going to write down in your gap. And remember that the order of the gaps in the form will follow the conversation. And now we're going to review how to complete a table in the Section 1. Remember, before you listen, you need to circle the keywords around the gaps, and then you need to listen to the conversation and complete the form below. In the IELTS exam, you'll be asked to write no more than 3 words and or a number for each answer. So this is your task, to read carefully and identify how many words you are allowed to write down. So as you see, we have a table below, and you have a title that states the following: Sandington Hotel reservation form. You are given 5 numbers which are followed by the gaps that you have to fill out. For example, as you see, before number 1 you have 2 words, guest name, and then you have a gap and Wiggins. Wiggins is the last name, and when you are listening to your recording, you have to write down and identify what kind of first name goes before this last name. The second one is already done for you. For example, you have arrival date, then June 23rd. And the next one, it's number 2, you have to fill out is length of stay. So length of stay represents number. So you have to listen carefully for how many days a person who is trying to reserve a room is trying to stay there. Maybe it's 3 days, maybe it can be 5 days, 10 days. So you have to listen and identify this number. Then we have room type. So room type It's like logically you can ask yourself, what kind of room types do hotels have? So think about that and be prepared to listen for this type of information. The next one we have is the room preferences. Room preferences. So here you have to be very careful because you have number 4 gap, but then you have also the word view. So that has to be word before the word view that you have to write down. And it has to make sense when you write this word down, and it has to be grammatically correct as well. So be very careful when you're listening for this information. And the last point we have, it's number 5, which is going to be credit card number. As you remember, we discussed previously about the numbers and different ways we can say the numbers. So you have to make sure you know all the different ways how numbers can be said, and you are listening carefully for these numbers. Important tips here to remember are not to write for words, because here in the IELTS test you are being asked to write only 3 words. You have to make sure you are using your pencil, then circling the keywords and reading and predicting what you are going to hear in your recordings. And now we're going to review how to complete a table in the listening test. The most important strategy here to keep in mind is circling the keywords and paraphrasing them. Also, you have to make sure when you are taking your notes, you write them down in a column for each speaker. This will help you to stay focused and not get confused. Also remember, paraphrasing will focus your attention on the subject of the conversation. Remember also that speakers might not use the exact same words in the conversation, so you should be able to hear some different words that have the same meaning. And as you see, we have an example here, and you have a question that states the following: which 2 activities is the guest interested in? And we have a list A through E, and we have a paraphrase words that you might hear in the listening recording. So for example, you have A, water sports. You might have a list A, water sports, but the speaker in the listening might say something like swimming, boating, water skiing. Also, you might have something like hikes, but the speaker might not mention the word hikes, but say walks and climbing. So you have to make sure you know how to hear these words with different words. And when you are given 30 seconds to prepare before listening, that's the thing you have to do. You have to try to paraphrase the answer choices you have and be ready to hear these ideas. IELTS Listening Module Strategies and Tips, Part 3. And now we are going to talk about our section 2, which is going to be about talk. The most important strategy here to remember is circling the keywords and paying attention to the words around the gaps. Also, you have to keep in mind that you need to pay attention to the grammatical form of the words around the gaps as well. And you have to also determine what kind of words are needed to complete the gap. Sometimes it can be a noun, sometimes it can be a modifier such as adjective, adverb, or maybe it's a verb or preposition. So make sure you look at the gaps and you read the complete sentence and understand what kind of information and what kind of grammatical form of the word you need to write down. So for example, we have an example below in here, and let's take a look. In the IELTS exam you ask, listen to the talk and complete sentences. Write no more than 3 words and or a number for each answer. So the most important part in here is to read carefully how many words you are allowed to write down, because sometimes they ask you to write only 1 word, so you need to be very careful. And as you see, we have 3 different statements, 3 different sentences in other words. And number 1, you have a gap, then it's followed by of Taipei 101 began in 1999. So when you're completing this kind of task, read it carefully. So you can ask yourself, what of Taipei 101 began in 1999? So as you see, you need a noun in this case. And make sure you do the same with the following sentences and read them carefully and identify for what type of information you need to listen when you're listening to your recordings. And now we are going to review how to label a diagram, plan, or map. Remember, when you're completing this type of task, you need to look at the words that are on the diagram, plan, or map. These type of words will help you focus your attention while listening. And that's very important while you're listening to this type of task. You paying attention to direction words or location words. They will help you identify specific spots on the plan or map. And also, you have to make sure that you listen carefully for the starting point so you can follow the conversation smoothly. There are important expressions for direction or location you need to know. For example, these are words such as in the middle, above, to the left, around the corner from, at the bottom of the map, north, south, east, west, next to, adjacent to, and so on. There are so many different words, and also it's very important to know the preposition of places such as behind, in front of, past, beyond, on the other side, across, or on the corner of. So make sure you know these type of words, and while you are listening, you are paying attention to them, because it will help you to focus your attention and go back to your diagram and understand the diagram and what kind of information you need to listen carefully. So, and that's how we complete our labeling a diagram type of task. And here you need to look at the diagram and read what you'll have to do. You may be asked to match labels with letters on the diagram, or you may be asked to write labels for different points on the diagram. So just make sure you do not write more words than required amount. We discussed it previously. And just listen to your conversation, and before you do so, make sure you analyze and learn the map or diagram you have. So IELTS test is asking you to label the plan below and write no more than 2 words and or a number for each answer. So make sure you are not writing 3 words. You can only write 1 or 2. And for example, here you have a map, and you see how we have a shopping complex, apartments, Maple Avenue, Green Acre Street, library, and we have 3, 1, 2, 3. So you see like gap fills that you have to fill out. And all these words are not here without a purpose. Keep in mind that. And then you need to read them. And it means you'll hear them in recording whenever you feel that you're not focusing, but you hear the word shopping complex. So try to go with your pencil and try to actually draw on your map. That will help you to stay focused. That's what I do all the time too. And yeah, so make sure also that you are very good with your directions like west, east, north, south. So this is very important. Sometimes you use these directions as well in the test. Our final task we're going to review today is giving a short answer. Remember that you need to circle the question and keywords to determine the kind of answer you need to give. Also remember the order of answers follows the talk. If you see the question beginning with who, remember you listen for a name or an occupation. You listen to something that refers to a person. Also, by studying the following lists of words, will help you to be more prepared for your upcoming test. So for example, here we have a question words that beginning with who, and type of answer will be a person or name. If your question begins with what, so you know that you are going to hear and write about a thing. Where refers to a place, when refers to a time. When your question begins with why, it means it refers to a reason. How much or how long, it's a quantity. And how often, that means it's a time again. So make sure you study and identify these type of words, and that will help you to be more prepared. And now we're going to review the most important listening tips that can help you do better while completing this task. Remember that you need to stay focused and use your pencil to take notes while being tested. Another important point to keep in mind is circling keywords and predicting your answers. Also remember, reading directions carefully is very important, because sometimes you'll be asked to write only 1 word, sometimes you can be asked to write 2 words or 3 words. So you have to make sure you identify how many words you need to write down in your answer sheet. Another important point to keep in mind also is paying attention to distractors, especially with numbers. Write what's said first and change if needed. Sometimes the speaker can say one number and then he can go back and change his mind. So you have to make sure you write down all the numbers you hear and paying attention which number you need to keep and write down in your answer sheet. And the most important one as well, it's your spelling. So make sure you are practicing a lot your spelling, because if you misspell some words, your answer choice is going to be incorrect. Even the word is correct, but if it's not spelled correctly, your answer is going to be marked wrong. So make sure you keep in mind these tips, and I'm sure they're going to help you a lot during your test. And now we are going to review our recap and the most important points we studied in our today's lesson. As you remember, you'll have 40 minutes to complete listening task, and you listen for 4 sections and answer 40 questions. You'll also listen to a conversation in the section 1, and you listen to a monologue in section 2. Remember that you listen to a conversation between up to 4 people with an educational training context in the section 3, and your section 4 is going to be about a lecture about a specific topic. And remember, most importantly, that you'll hear everything only one time, so you have to make sure you are paying attention, taking notes, and circling your keywords and staying focused.